The rise of the Rothschilds as the most influential banking dynasty in Europe is a story that intertwines finance, geopolitics, family strategy, and the profound transformation of the modern world. Their ascent began not in the marble halls of power, but in the cramped Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt, where Mayer Amschel Rothschild laid the foundations of an empire built on trust, information, adaptability, and the audacity to operate on a continental scale at a time when borders, wars, and prejudice limited the movement of most people. The Rothschild dynasty did not emerge solely through wealth. They emerged through foresight, coordination, and the ability to see finance as a tool for shaping history rather than merely accumulating profit. As Europe entered an era of revolutions, industrialization, and empire building, the Rothschilds positioned themselves at the nexus of capital and power, developing a network of banks across the continent that allowed them to influence everything from war financing to infrastructure projects, international diplomacy, and the evolution of modern financial systems. The story begins with Mayer Amschel, a coin dealer and financial advisor whose reputation for integrity allowed him to build trust among Europe's elites despite the legal and social restrictions placed on Jews at the time. His insight was simple, yet revolutionary. Information was the most valuable currency in a fragmented Europe. Mayer cultivated relationships with aristocrats, merchants, and military officials, recognizing that financial influence required more than capital. It required intelligence, discretion, and speed. This philosophy became the blueprint for the Rothschild expansion. Instead of keeping his sons near him, Mayer sent each one to a different European capital: Amschel to Frankfurt, Salomon to Vienna, Nathan to London, Karl to Naples, and James to Paris, creating a family-controlled multinational banking system long before such a structure existed. The brothers communicated through private couriers trained to move across war-torn Europe with unprecedented efficiency. This secret network allowed the Rothschilds to receive news faster than governments and to act on opportunities before anyone else. Nathan Rothschild, the most famous of Mayer's sons, transformed London into the nerve center of the family empire. Arriving in England with little more than skill and ambition, he soon became indispensable to merchants and governments alike. His breakthrough came during the Napoleonic Wars, when his ability to mobilize capital quickly proved invaluable to Britain's war efforts. At a time when moving money across borders was fraught with danger pirates, enemy blockades, unstable currencies, the Rothschild network offered a solution. Through a sophisticated system of bills of exchange, couriers, and local contacts, Nathan facilitated payments to British armies operating across Europe. His reliability made the Rothschilds crucial to Britain's war machine and established their reputation as financiers who could do what governments themselves struggled to accomplish. The famous episode of Nathan, allegedly using early information about Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo to profit in the London stock market, has become a mythic chapter in financial lore. Though many retellings exaggerate or distort the facts, the essence of the story captures something true about the Rothschilds. They understood the power of information and timing better than anyone in their generation. Whether or not Nathan manipulated the market that day, the family undeniably benefited from their unrivaled ability to move intelligence faster than official channels. This capability cemented their position as Europe's most formidable financial intermediaries. After the Napoleonic Wars, Europe faced the monumental task of reconstruction. Buildings lay in ruins, treasuries were depleted, and political uncertainty loomed. Into this environment of instability stepped the Rothschilds with something rare: liquidity, credibility, and a transnational structure capable of channeling capital where it was most needed. They financed government loans for Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Britain, essentially becoming the financial backbone of post-war Europe. Their involvement was not merely transactional, it was diplomatic. Governments relied on the Rothschilds as trusted brokers who could mobilize resources swiftly while maintaining political neutrality. The family became so central to European finance that many states preferred Rothschild loans to taxation, allowing monarchies and ministries to fund wars, infrastructure, and reforms without burdening their populations. The Rothschilds also played a key role in the Industrial Revolution. They financed railways, mines, steel mills, and other capital-intensive projects that required long-term funding unavailable from traditional lenders. Their support was instrumental in developing railway systems in France, Austria, Germany, and Italy, Railroads were the backbone of 19th century industrial expansion, and by financing them, the Rothschilds literally shaped the map of Europe's economic future. Their influence spread beyond finance into diplomacy. Kings and foreign ministers consulted them. Ambassadors sought their advice. And revolutions often depended on whether the Rothschilds supported or withheld funding. Their neutrality and discretion made them mediators in conflicts from the Italian unification to European debt crises. Yet for all their power, the Rothschilds operated under constant scrutiny and prejudice. Anti-Semitism both limited and defined their strategies. Unable to rely on aristocratic titles or political office, they built influence through capital, networks, and reliability. Ironically, the very barriers designed to keep them out of European political structures pushed them into creating their own form of transnational power, one that governments depended upon but could not fully control. Their success challenged stereotypes and provoked backlash. Conspiracy theories emerged, claiming the Rothschilds secretly ruled Europe. These myths, still circulating today, exaggerated their influence but underscored a deeper truth. The idea that a Jewish family could become more powerful than kings unsettled many in a Europe defined by hierarchy and hereditary privilege. The Rothschilds' strategy of maintaining strict family unity, intermarriage, and centralized decision-making helped preserve their influence through turbulent decades. They created charitable institutions, supported Jewish emancipation, and funded scientific, cultural, and humanitarian projects. Their philanthropy extended across Europe, and their private collections and libraries became symbols of intellectual as well as financial prestige. As the 19th century progressed, however, new forces began reshaping the financial landscape. National banks strengthened, corporate finance evolved, wars and revolutions altered borders and economies. The Rothschilds adapted by diversifying into mining, oil, and global finance, maintaining relevance even as the world around them changed. But by the early 20th century, the era of the family-run banking dynasty began to fade. World War I, the rise of centralized monetary policy, and shifts in global finance reduced the dominance of private banking houses. Still, the Rothschild legacy endured, not only in their surviving financial institutions, but in the very architecture of modern banking, international networks, long-term government loans, rapid information systems, and the fusion of finance with geopolitics. The story of the Rothschilds is ultimately a story about the creation of modern Europe, not through armies or monarchies, but through credit, trust, and the quiet but powerful influence of a family whose vision transcended borders, whose networks became lifelines for nations, and whose rise symbolized the transformative power of Ngui Ke Chuyen Tai Chin Danoi, financial vision when it is wielded with discipline, coordination, and a deep understanding of how power flows through nations. In the second phase of the Rothschild story, after the family established itself as Europe's preeminent financial dynasty, their influence expanded into realms that blurred the boundaries between banking, diplomacy, and statecraft. The Rothschilds were not merely lenders, they became architects of international stability, brokers of geopolitical balance, and silent partners in the grand transformations that redefined 19th century Europe. Their banking houses became hubs of intelligence, their couriers, the fastest information network on the continent, and their relationships with monarchs and ministers so trusted that governments often treated Rothschild advice as unofficial policy. One of the dynasty's most significant contributions during this era was its role in stabilizing state finances. European governments were perpetually engaged in wars, reforms, territorial changes, and massive infrastructure projects that strained their treasuries. In this environment, default was common and investor confidence fragile. The Rothschilds developed a financing model built on reputation and reliability. When a nation borrowed through the Rothschilds, markets assumed the loan was safe. This Rothschild seal of approval lowered interest rates for entire countries. Investors across Europe, from wealthy aristocrats to small savers, often bought government bonds simply because the Rothschilds backed them. In effect, the family created one of the earliest credit rating systems long before such institutions existed. Their influence reached its height during the mid-19th century. In Vienna, Solomon Rothschild financed the Habsburg Empire's modernization and railway expansion. In Paris, James Rothschild became a titan of French finance, funding railways, mining companies, and state loans that fueled France's industrial boom. In London, Nathan and later Lionel Rothschild helped Britain finance wars, colonial expansion, and critical infrastructure such as the Suez Canal. In Naples and Frankfurt, the Rothschild branches shaped southern Italian development and German unification finance. Although each branch operated independently, they coordinated on major deals, pooling resources in ways no other banking house could match. This coordination gave them a unique advantage in diplomacy. When European powers convened to negotiate treaties or resolve crises, behind the scenes, the Rothschilds often consulted with diplomats, offering financial strategies to prevent wars or stabilize fragile peace agreements. During the tumultuous revolutions of 1848, when monarchies trembled and economies cratered, the Rothschild network acted as a stabilizing force, helping governments secure emergency funding and restore confidence. While the family had no armies and held no official office, their ability to provide or withhold capital shaped political outcomes in subtle but profound ways. But their role in geopolitics was not without controversy. Critics accused the Rothschilds of wielding too much power, manipulating markets, or influencing foreign policy for profit. Anti-Semitic conspiracies proliferated, portraying the family as puppet masters, controlling nations from behind the curtain. These myths grew not because the Rothschilds secretly ruled Europe, but because their visibility as a wealthy, successful Jewish family clashed with deeply ingrained prejudices. Their real power lay not in secret control, but in their unmatched capacity to mobilize capital and information in a Europe still learning how interconnected its economies had become. As Europe industrialized, the Rothschilds invested heavily in infrastructure that formed the backbone of modern economies. Their financing of railroads was not merely profitable, it accelerated the movement of people, goods, and ideas, knitting together fragmented regions and supporting national unification. In France, their investment built the Chemins de Fer du Nord, one of the most important rail networks in the country. In Austria, they funded coal mines, steel production, and transport links that underpinned the empire's industrial growth. In Britain and beyond, they supported telegraph lines, bridges, ports, and other projects that helped lay the foundations of globalized trade. Yet even as their empire grew, new forces began reshaping finance. The rise of joint stock banks, the proliferation of capital markets, and the increasing centralization of monetary power challenged the dominance of private banking houses. Central banks, especially the Bank of England, became more influential, reducing the need for large private lenders to stabilize governments. Corporate finance shifted from family-run partnerships to institutional structures. The Rothschilds adapted by diversifying into mining, metals, wine, and later oil. But the age of private banking dynasties was slowly giving way to the era of modern finance. The 20th century further eroded their influence. World War I disrupted financial networks, collapsed empires, and drove governments to print money and issue domestic debt beyond the reach of private banks. World War II brought devastation, persecution, and expropriation, especially for the continental branches. Though the family rebuilt in the post-war period, the global financial system had changed irrevocably. Wall Street investment banks, multinational corporations, and new global institutions now shaped world finance. Even so, the Rothschild name endured as a symbol of financial acumen, resilience, and legacy. Their banking groups modernized, merging or restructuring to stay relevant in a new era of global finance. But the deeper legacy of the Rothschilds transcends their wealth. They pioneered international finance, proving that capital could move across borders even when armies and diplomats could not. They demonstrated the power of information networks in shaping financial outcomes. They championed Jewish emancipation in an age of pervasive discrimination, using their influence to support civil rights across Europe. They funded scientific research, libraries, schools, and hospitals, leaving a cultural and philanthropic imprint rivaling their financial one. Ultimately, the story of the Rothschilds is not just the story of a banking family, but the story of Europe's transformation from fractured states into interconnected economies, from aristocratic privilege into industrial capitalism, from slow communication into rapid information networks, and from local finance into global markets. The Rothschilds helped build the infrastructure, financial, political, and technological, that allowed modern Europe to emerge. Their rise illustrates how private initiative can shape public history, how networks can outmaneuver empires, and how a single family, through discipline, intelligence, and unity, can influence the destiny of nations without ever ruling them. And in tracing their journey from the Frankfurt Ghetto to the heights of global finance, we see a deeper truth: that the forces shaping history are not always kings or generals, but sometimes bankers, couriers, and visionaries whose quiet calculations change the world in ways visible only in hindsight. Completed.